This video is sponsored by PDS Debt.
The mountains here are not like the mountains out west. However, they're still mountains nonetheless. And they'll take their toll on you.
I mean, and if I think back, the things that I remember are just the giant eyes and then just the white teeth. And I'm sure my memory's kind of filled it in over a little bit over the years, but the teeth just seemed so like shockingly white. And the face was moving, and looking back, I don't know if it was like baring its teeth at me or smiling at me. I don't know. It was just weird, but it would just slowly, and it was just weird. It's not like it was trying to like hide or anything like that, because I could obviously see it, but the movements were very, very slow and deliberate. And I stared at it, and I'm just going, what am I seeing here? Should I yell? Should I say anything?
We got screamed at from about, I'm guessing, maybe 75 yards inside the woods, straight in front of the truck. And it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was like guttural, but yet a lot of volume. So much that we both could feel it in our chest. And it just instilled fear in both of us. And you weren't expecting anything like that. I mean, you've done this 100 times,
Before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about the sponsor of this video. Are you feeling trapped under credit card bills, personal loans, or general debt? It's like your money's working for everyone but you. Don't let it keep slipping away. Try PDS Debt instead and discover why thousands of people each month trust PDS to save them time and money. PDS Debt does more than just help you manage your debt. They empower you to take control. With their technology, they go beyond the numbers to understand your unique financial situation. No more cookie-cutter solutions, just a clear path to financial freedom that fits your lifestyle. And here's the best part, there's no minimum credit score required. Whether your credit is bad or fair, they're here to help you save more, pay off your debt faster, and start putting money back to where it belongs, in your savings account. Getting started is easy. Go to pdsdebt.com/smalltownmonsters to complete your free debt assessment and see what options you have available. Every day you hold off, it's costing you money. Get started with your free debt analysis in just 30 seconds at pdsdebt.com/smalltownmonsters. That's pdsdebt.com/smalltownmonsters. Take back control by visiting pdsdebt.com/smalltownmonsters today.
Compared to the rest of the state, it's very rugged, very mountainous, and it doesn't take long. Once you leave the mountain area, it gets very flat. So the central part of the state is very flat, but the western part of the state where it adjoins West Virginia is the mountainous part. Be prepared. It's pretty rustic. The mountains here are not like the mountains out west. However, they're still mountains nonetheless, and they'll take their toll on you.
Not quite as rugged as when you get a little further to the west with West Virginia, but still very mountainous. Shenandoah Valley, it's a big valley. The street that I lived on, you could not get up and down it in the wintertime just because, it's a very sharp incline for it. And that's just pretty much everywhere where I grew up at through there. So very mountainous, not quite as rugged and as treacherous as West Virginia is, but still you're starting to see the beginnings of that in that area at that point. And it just gets worse and worse the further out west you go.
We're kind of in competition with Virginia. We always say the best part of Virginia moved west in 1863. So I'll let Charles talk more about the Virginia side since he's the Virginia investigator.
There's a lot of forested areas there. It's just, there's more forested land than there are people. I looked it up years ago, and I think it was around 1.6 million acres total. I could be off some there between all those national forests together. They do join each other, so you could literally get into the national forest on the north side and just continue walking south and go through both national forests and walk for days and days and days and days before you're ever coming out of the national forest land. It's quite the abundance of forested land. It's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's almost too much. I'd almost rather have less land and more chances of finding some activity. So it's difficult to pinpoint where any activity can be when you're over there. It's like there's more walking, hiking, and trying than there is actually getting results from all of the hard work you're putting into. If you're looking for wildlife, there's more an abundance of deer than anything. You'll come across deer every square mile of this national forest, of both national forests. Bear, there's quite a bit of bear in some parts of it, but the bear is a little more difficult to find. I see the occasional bear on my property. My property joins the national forest on two sides, the George Washington National Forest up in northern Rockingham County, and I get the occasional bear passing through, but they tend to roam quite a bit. Can't really pinpoint them either, but there's a lot of squirrel, gray squirrel, red fox squirrels. Got a lot of owls. I get a lot of owls on audio. Fox, in my part, we have a lot of gray fox. I don't get any red fox where my place is. It's fun to watch the fox grow up. I have cameras all over my property, and I spot their denning area on occasion and watch their pups grow. So it's just, we have quite the abundance of wildlife. So there's definitely hot spots across the state of Virginia. The biggest hot spot is Southwest Virginia, down closer to Kentucky. That has always been the hot spot from reports, but if you follow the reports, they still happen all the way up the western side of the state, up to where we're at now. We're in Pendleton County, West Virginia right now, but it's just right across from Rockingham County, Virginia. But we get reports all the way up the mountainous portion, but even parts of the state that isn't mountainous. I've worked reports over on the eastern shore. I've worked reports near Richmond, Williamsburg. So there's still Bigfoot activity across the state. It's just, it seems like this side of the state tends to get more reports filed. And the reports, for a report to happen, someone has to witness something, and then that person has to know what to do with the information that they have, and they also have to put aside ridicule, because they understand that if they file a report with someone and it goes public, people sometimes will poke fun at them. And so not every sighting gets reported. A lot of it just is put in the back of their mind and tried to forget about. They don't always want to remember it. much less tell anyone about it.
Did you ever grow up with any stories or hearing anything about any kind of Bigfoot-like things up there?
Actually, not as a kid, which is weird. The area I grew up in, it's a very old town, had a lot of Revolutionary War history. It was the capital of the United States for like a day because the Continental Congress actually stayed there, members of it, and it was temporarily the capital. Usually when you get in the areas like that, it's mostly ghost stories that you get. So anything kind of like out of the ordinary was kind of tied into like ghost type stuff. So it wasn't really anything that I grew up with an interest in or really hearing that much about. So when I had that sighting of something when I was a kid, it's not like my mind was really primed for it at that point. I don't even know if I knew what the Patterson-Gimlin film was at that point or if I ever even heard about it at that. Probably the only exposure I would have had to Bigfoot would have been I had a crazy great aunt that read a lot of the old Weekly World News and National Enquirers when they were just really out there. And just the occasional really sensational kind of Bigfoot story that would be on the cover of that I would see when I'd be over at her house. But that was probably the limit of my exposure to it.
So what did you see then, if you could just describe the area that you were in?
I was in George Washington National Forest, and I was on a Boy Scout outing. There was a thing that I was involved in, actually getting inducted into, called Order the Arrow. And part of the Order the Arrow induction is they take you out and they basically spread you apart and then you sleep wherever they put you at, And generally, the scout leaders that are taking you out, it's kind of a ritual that they purposely put you in an uncomfortable spot to sleep, on top of a rock, on top of some tree roots, something like that. So a lot of people just don't sleep that first night out there. You kind of take a vow of silence. You're not supposed to talk over the weekend either. So I'm out there and it's the very first night that we got put out for it, So I'm laying there, I'm a kid, 14, maybe 13, something like that. I got involved in scouting earlier than a lot of people did because I had some family members that were involved in the local scout council. So I'm out there at night and I'm just laying there and, I'd spent a lot of time outdoors just over virtue of like being involved in the Boy Scouts. And I'd been outdoors, a lot growing up. But you didn't really sleep under the stars a lot, it was usually tent camping. So, and it's just it's a weird little thing to a kid, you're out there, this thing's very steeped in tradition and ritual and all that. So, your mind's racing, your adrenaline's going, not to mention that you're parked in a very uncomfortable spot. So I'm just laying there staring at the stars. And sometime over the course of the night, I start hearing like movement around me. And, I was kind of half expecting to get something happened, you know what I'm saying? For them to wake you up in the middle of the night and take you off on some like weird, like, induction ritual task or something like that. So I keep hearing movement and it's a clear night. We've got a pretty good moon. Because I just remember laying there and just like, watching that moon over it going, all right, at least I'm not in pitch black out here, And I see something peeking at me from behind a tree and it just keeps coming out and I'm staring at it. And it's weird that you're in such a weird spot as like a kid of that age because you're not supposed to talk. And I'm laying there going, all right, is this a trick to see if I'm going to break this like, weekend vow of silence that we're supposed to be under? And this thing just kept looking at me from behind a tree. Looking back, if I had to gauge the distance, man, maybe it was as far as over to that tree there, like a little bit further. What is that, 20 feet, 25 feet? Staring out around behind me. And when I look back on the face, have you ever seen the Neanderthal drawings from Them and Us, that Danny, what is his name, Vengermini thing? When I first saw that, I went, man, if you threw in a little bit of Harry and the Hendersons, that's what I saw. Big, blocky, square teeth. Because at the time, I thought it was like smiling at me. I mean, and if I think back, the things that I remember are just the giant eyes and then just the white teeth. And I'm sure my memory's kind of filled it in a little bit over the years, but the teeth just seemed so like shockingly white. And the face was moving. And, looking back, I don't know if it was like baring its teeth at me or smiling at me. I don't know. It was just weird, but it would just slowly, and it was just weird. It's not like it was trying to like hide or anything like that because I could obviously see it, but the movements were very, very slow and deliberate. And I stared at it and I'm just going, what am I seeing here? Should I yell? Should I say anything? And it just kind of slowly backed away and then just kind of walked very carefully off to the side. When I say very carefully, its movements were very just slow and deliberate. But it wasn't clumsy at all. And that was the thing that got me, is that it wasn't like a guy in a suit moving where you're not trying to, like, you know, trip and you can't really see out of the mask. I'll definitely tell you that the eyes were very big. You know, when you see somebody wearing a mask, even if you can see their eyes, they're kind of sunken in, you know, a little bit because of the space where they are behind the rubber openings of the mask there. Not that at all. And it just seemed like it moved very, very slowly, like it was trying not to make any real noise at that point. I had the impression it wanted me to see it. I mean, it was not trying to, even though it was behind a tree, it was coming out far enough and we were making eye contact and all that. So the next morning, again, you're not supposed to talk over the entire weekend, but the next morning, the scout leader they put us with was deaf. So when his back was turned, all of us were talking. And I'm going, anybody see anything weird last night, you know? And then nobody else reported anything at all. And that's something that stuck with me all these years, because I'm going, if it was just somebody out hoaxing the scouts, they would have done it to more than just me. And I would think that somebody else would go, yeah, did you see that gorilla walking through the woods last night or whatever it was? And nobody else like saw anything. And as I've just thought over it the years, that's the one thing that stood out to me, is that if it was like just a group of, like, you know, maybe some of the older kids or the scout leaders, and hey, let's have fun with these, you know, these scared little, you know, 13, 14-year-olds out in the woods, they would have done it to just more than one of us, you know. And it would have been the talk, I think, of what was going on, especially since the group that I was with, the people that were around me, we were talking all weekend. Every time the guy's back was turned, we were chatting it up and talking. And after I asked that first time, I never really brought it up again, because, you know, I mean, what do you do? I mean, again, and thinking back all these years, you know, I still can't say that somebody didn't hoax me, you know, somebody wasn't playing a trick on me. You know, as I've thought about it over the years, I can't even swear that I didn't fall half asleep and like dream it, you know. But again, like I mentioned to you earlier, that was not something that was ever in the back of my head. I mean, even telling like campfire stories in that particular area, that part of the Shenandoah Valley, it was always like ghost story related, you know. So it seems like, you know, if it had just been my subconscious playing tricks on me or me falling into like a dream state, it would have been something my mind was familiar with. You know, the pump would be kind of primed for that, you know. But regardless of whatever it was, that's what planted the seed with me. And I had a lifelong interest in it after that. Always just going, what did I see, man? Was it real? Was it a dream? Was it just a really cleverly played hoax that, you know, my mind is just kind of embellished over the years? You know, you can't tell, man. I was a kid. But like I said, certain things just stand out, man. Those teeth, those blocky white teeth just stand out to me so much. And then just the size of the eyes, just oversized like eyes that just seemed glassy. You know what I'm saying? They just seemed like they seemed alive, and they just seemed like I just kind of remember looking at it, and it kind of came out to the side, and you could just see like little, and I guess it was the moon maybe reflecting in it a little bit, but just like little points of light on it and everything like that. It was very animated. It was very lifelike. So, you know, and then, you know, rural Virginia, you know, back in the mid 80s there, you know, the late 80s and all that, you know, there's these boys, we were lucky to be able to have like money for like, you know, to go on campouts and stuff like that. You know, it's not like a really wealthy area. So, you know, a lot of times these troops were like on real shoestring budgets, like doing this stuff. And a lot of the troop leaders that were involved with it, they weren't very wealthy men. You know, they were working class guys that, you know, and a lot of their disposable income went to kind of help the troop out and all that. So if they were going to do a hoax, it seems like spending money on like a very hyper realistic costume, it seemed kind of out of the, you know, doesn't seem like it's logical. And if they did, they're not going to just do it with one kid at that point. So I don't know, man. Like I said, it could have been a dream, could have been a hoax, but man, it seems realistic. And like I said, when I saw that them and us like drawing like years later, the face was longer, you know, but if you've seen those illustrations, one of the key features of it are that very bared, square, blocky teeth are very like defined in all of those illustrations. And that was one of the things that it just jumps in my mind. I can still see it to this day. If I could draw, I could sit here and draw you a great sketch of it, you know, but it, like I said, that's just what started it with me at that point. That's what started it with me at that point. It's been like a lifelong obsession ever since then. So. even sitting here talking about it, I had that crazy great aunt who got all of those things, and the Bigfoot stuff was always very comical, And the stories I'm talking about, Bigfoot love slave, and just, Bigfoots and UFOs and everything like that. And I didn't really think about it being like a forest phenomenon at that point, and especially with just the way it had been reinforced with my scouting experience, Again, all of the campfire stories that you tell, always paranormal related or the killer in the woods or anything like that. Never any Bigfoot stuff at all for it, And I think that's why it just, looking back on it is what's kind of kept me from convincing myself that I just dreamed it, And there's a chance of that. There's a possibility of it. Human mind works in weird ways, man. There could have been a little nugget of something that I don't remember that had been planted that my subconscious just brought up. And that was the time it chose to do it. But, I don't remember any other dreams I had as a kid, like if I do I can't think of anything else I dreamed as a kid that I remember to this day, but that just stands out to me, man. I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Now, you had this experience, and then years later, you kind of started looking into the Bigfoot stuff for yourself.
Yeah.
Was there a point where, because some of the stuff you reported, tree peeking.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That stuff that's like,
Mhm.
this is a motif.
Yeah.
Very common with the Bigfoot topic.
The tree peeking, the blocky teeth stuff. When I came back, because I'm still going, you're a kid, you're unsure of yourself, you know what I'm saying, I was a geeky kid, I hadn't, I was tall for my age, so I was kind of awkward, self-conscious about it and everything like that. So it's not something that, I really felt comfortable talking to people about. But, the public library, we had a great public library for my hometown. So I went back and started to look into stuff like that. And then when In Search Of came out, for people that are my age, a lot of us, that was kind of that thing that really springboarded a lot of people into this. And I remember the Bigfoot thing for In Search Of. When I saw that, I was just extremely interested in it. The internet really wasn't a thing, so you were kind of limited to what you had at the public library and then what you would see on TV. There just wasn't a lot of stuff. And then years later, just always it was in the back of my mind, and I would always look into it. And then when I got older, and I started getting, means of my own and everything like that, I started going out and looking for it. And then when the internet came out, then all of a sudden you're exposed to a wider variety of reports than what somebody just possibly decided to editorialize and put in a book at that point. And that's when the things would start to jump out to you, the tree peeking behavior that would come out. And with me, I look at it and I'm going, it wasn't something trying to stay hidden. Again, I know I'm putting a lot of my own opinion into this right now, but it didn't seem as if it was something that was trying to stay hidden, that was just trying to sneak a look at me, because you could clearly see it on both sides of the tree. It was not a massive tree it was trying to hide behind. And it was doing it so slowly and deliberately, but then it was locking its gaze with me, that it had to know that I saw it. It wasn't that, it just seemed like, I don't know, it was just very deliberate. And then when the way it walked off, I described it to Jesse a few years ago, and because it looked at me as it moved off, and it kind of, like it was slinking off almost, like it was kind of maintaining eye contact, it was moving slow. It was very weird, you know what I'm saying? But the teeth stood out to me, the large eyes, the tree peeking, and then just the kind of, the way it moved was it was not very quick, but it was graceful in a very slow motion manner. Like if I got up and tried to very slowly walk, I don't know if I'd be able to manage that level of, you just don't walk that slow, almost in slow motion. And like I said, I just remember it had very deliberate steps, but it wasn't looking at the ground. It maintained eye contact with me, which would be kind of hard for somebody in a rubber suit and a mask to do, and then just disappear in the tree line. I never heard it move away, so it just got in there and just went quiet. So yeah, I don't know. It's very, very weird. Like I said, to this day, to me, like I said, and I guess I'll never know, you know what I'm saying? I'll never know whether that was real, whether somebody was, all of those like scout leaders and everything like that, they're old men or they passed on at this point, unless I run into somebody who was out there with me on that weekend, that time. And those were kids from all over the state at that point. There were maybe only 2 or 3 other people from my particular troop that were out there with me, and they were all scattered because that's part of it. They take you away from anything that's familiar. So everybody, all the kids that are from the same group go to different areas. You're with a bunch of strangers all weekend long. So I'll never know. I'll never know if it was like real, if it was just something I imagined, or if it was just somebody having fun at my expense. So, But regardless, if it was somebody, I'd thank them. You know, they put me on like a great little journey that I've had a ball doing for the past, like, you know, several years. I've got to experience some stuff that I never would have experienced if that hadn't happened to me in the woods that night.
Could you just run me through kind of one more time what really got you into the Bigfoot world and like your encounter while you were hunting?
I got into this by accident, like most people. So I actually was, I'm a hunter, I hunt deer, and I was in Orkney Springs up in Shenandoah County. I have a good friend of mine who owns a bunch of property up there, and I've hunted there since I was a teenager. And I went in once, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I went to go hunt, and I was with another friend of mine, and we pull in off the road, nose first into the woods, and we turn off the truck, we open the front doors to get out. We're trying to get to our stand before daylight, and open the doors, get out, close the front doors, and before we could open the back doors to get our gear, we got screamed at from about, I'm guessing maybe 75 yards inside the woods, straight in front of the truck. And it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was like guttural, but yet a lot of volume. So much that we both could feel it in our chest. And it just instilled fear in both of us. And you weren't expecting anything like that. I mean, you've done this 100 times, you know. And so we didn't hunt that day. We ended up getting back in the truck and sitting there for a long time, just debating back and forth. What was that? What'd we hear? I'm like, I know it wasn't a cat. I had seen a mountain lion probably 300 or 400 yards from that exact spot, but it wasn't a cat scream. This was a different guttural roar, much deeper. I mean, if you were standing 75 yards away and you screamed at me, I don't think I could feel it. But this thing, for some reason, this scream just went through me. Like I actually described this in my books, saying that you would have to have a chest the size of a whiskey barrel to be able to make that kind of volume at that distance to be able to feel it. But yeah, that was my first encounter. And so what I did from there is I sat on it for a couple of years, just wondering back and forth, what was that? How am I going to figure out what this was? So I went online to try to figure out what it was, and I came across Monongahela's website, Sasquatch Bioacoustics, and he had some audio on there saying that it was a Sasquatch. I'm like, well, that sounds almost identical to what I heard. And so I'm like, I don't know that I believe or if I disbelieve, but I'm open-minded enough that I want to find out. So I connected with the BFRO at that point, and I had already tried doing some Bigfoot research to try to drum up some activity, try to elicit a response in some way, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So when I connected with the BFRO, I went on one of their public-private expeditions and met a bunch of great people that was also their first expedition, and now, gosh, majority of the people that was on that expedition are now like some of my best friends, and they're all BFRO investigators as well now. But the thing it did was it put me in touch with other people who are looking for the same answers that I'm looking for. And so what I learned from that expedition was, you know, what I'm doing. I'm going out in the woods, and now I have a little better understanding of what I'm looking for, what to do to try to get a response from them. And I'm still in contact with these same fantastic people that I've met on that very first expedition back in 2012. And we're all like not just best friends, we're all like family now. I'm telling you, that's the best thing about Bigfooting. You know, the people you meet become closer to you than your own family. So it's and we get together probably 3 or 4 times a year now. So just to go out squatching.
We were on an expedition where there was an old farm site where they would do recreations and through the daytime, show you, okay, this is the way it was back in the 1800s, and historic site. And we went out at night, and I went up this access road to this location while Charles and another gentleman stayed down below. And I said, I'm going to walk up here maybe 100, 150 yards and up this hill and see if I can see anything. So I got to the top of the hill and it was just quiet, didn't really make any noise. And it sounded like something jumped out of a tree and hit the ground, but it sounded like this thing weighed 800 or 1,000 pounds. It made a thud and you could feel it in the ground. So I was pretty excited. So I tried to call them on the radio. I'm like, hey, did you guys just hear that? It sounded like something jumped out of a tree and hit the ground. And no answer, because they didn't have a radio on. So I hot-footed back down to where they were. And I don't recall, y'all didn't hear anything, did you?
We heard the thud.
Did you hear the thud?
Yeah.
I could feel it in the ground.
You were closer to it than we.
Yeah. So, what the heck was that?
Even at that distance, we could still hear it. We just couldn't feel it.
That was pretty crazy. Was it the same night we went back to the campground and there was a metal gate there, and something hit that gate? Sounded like with a nice solid piece of wood, just bang. That was probably, an hour or so after we got back to camp.
Yeah, we had been taunting them for a while, trying to get a reaction.
So yeah, there's things have happened in Virginia, just a little different, but still strange activity. I was trying to think. I know when you were kayaking and out in front of a group and hearing knocks along the way, that the people that were in the group hiking couldn't hear. So we've had some pretty good activity in Virginia.
Man, I've had some hairy things happen, some hair-raising experiences. I mean, of course I've been screamed at. I've had rocks thrown at me. I actually got surrounded once. I had a couple of them around me, and they were, one of them was definitely within 30 yards of me, because it did a wood knock so loud that I stumbled off of my little stool. And then there was another one behind me, and then we had some rustling off to the side at the same moment. So there was definitely two there, possibly three at one moment. And but when that happens, you can feel like I shouldn't be here kind of feeling. But I never felt threatened at any of this, because they never become aggressive or anything. I've heard they can become aggressive, but I've never experienced any aggression. So it's to me, it's like I'm out here just trying to get something to prove that they exist, more so for myself than anyone. I don't really care if anyone else believes what my evidence is, whether it's authentic or not. It's for the most part, we keep it to ourselves anyway. We don't even share it, because you share that kind of stuff and you're just opening yourself up to trolls to start saying things bad about you. So I just try to keep it to ourselves.
And on that note, have you heard of any reports or taken any reports from the area that is kind of between where we're at and where you live, that section of the mountains that we were talking about going to these days, Reddish Knob and there? Have you heard of stuff in that area?
Yeah. So we've done stuff. I've had expeditions in those parts of the state. We've had lots of wood knocks and such happen. In fact, we have an expedition coming up here next month within that region. Won't exactly say where, but we get together on a regular basis and go do our own research. However, there's one report that comes to mind specifically. It never became a BFRO report, but it is one of the best reports I've ever taken. Yeah, so not even that far away from here in Raleigh Springs. I got the Facebook Messenger one time from a guy that I kind of grew up with. It's pretty infamous. You always get the message where someone says, "You don't really believe in that Bigfoot crap, do you?" And just trying to get a feel for how I feel about it. And I'm like, yeah, I've experienced some things that I just can't really explain any other way. And I've been out there enough to see and experience these things that I think there's definitely something out there. I haven't seen one face to face yet, but it's just a matter of time, I think. And then they always say, well, let me tell you what happened to me, so that they know that I'm not going to ridicule them at that point, because that's the biggest problem with being a Bigfoot believer, ridicule. We get ridiculed constantly. I'm okay with that. It's a good hobby. Everybody needs a good hobby, so hiking with a purpose. But anyway, this guy went bear hunting. I think it was back around the early 90s at a place, Driver Dam. Back then you could drive all the way back to the dam itself. And he was getting his gear out of his truck, and he said these two bear dogs ran past him just letting loose. And he's like, well, they're on a bear. I'm going to get up to my spot. He said to himself, I'm going to get up to my spot. Maybe these dogs will chase it to me up there. So he hustled on up the mountain and got up to this little spot. And it's a little open field. It's like 75 yards wide, I think he said, maybe like 125 yards deep. And he was standing on a flat rounded rock of smooth, and just at the very edge of the woods, underneath of some evergreen trees, so probably some cedars or pines or something. So he's like, I was pretty hidden back in there. And he said the wind was blowing to his face across that whole field, and he could hear the dogs behind him circling around like this. And then they came over to the far end of the field, but the dogs never got that far. He said they stopped about halfway across the field, but down over the ridge. And then he heard something crashing on the far corner of the field. And he said a Bigfoot came right up out of that woods on the corner and had his back to him. And he said, I could see it standing there with his back to me, breathing just like, because it had been running from these dogs. And he said just the next thing that happened was the strangest thing. He said the wind was blowing to him, so he said it didn't wind him. He said, I was on this rock, no leaves. I didn't make a sound, and I didn't move. And this thing jumped. Had its back to him. He said it jumped up, spun in, and faced him just with one fluid movement and looked straight at him. And he said, we looked at each other for probably 15, 20 seconds. And he said, I don't know how it knew I was there. But he's like, I'm holding I think he said it was a .338 Lapua. He's like, I got the gun that I could take this thing out with, but he's like, it looked human, but looked like a massive human. He's like, I couldn't shoot it, but I wanted to look at it. And he said, I wanted to look at it through the scope. And so he's like, we were in a standoff. And so he's like, I did the only thing that I knew to do. He's like, I jerked my rifle up with one fluid movement, just real quick, to try to get a look at it. He said, the second I flinched, that thing took off running across that open field and was across it in a matter of a couple of seconds and into the woods on the other side. And to this day, he's like, I know what I saw. But he's like, I didn't get a look at it through the scope because it moved so quickly, but it's puzzling. I mean, it was definitely running from the dogs. The dogs were on it, not a bear. He got a very good look at it, and that was in Raleigh Springs, just east of here, just not even very far, probably 20 minutes from here.
I know a lady that I worked with who was coming back from West Virginia, went into Virginia on the bottom side of Shenandoah Mountain in Raleigh Springs, and this was broad daylight, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Memorial Day weekend, and a Sasquatch walked across the road in front of her. But it stopped at the edge of the road first, like it could hear her car, but couldn't tell exactly where the sound was coming from. and it turned and looked the opposite direction, and then it just turned back and went on across the road. And she stopped, looked, couldn't see or hear anything. Then there's a dry creek bed there, and it stepped down into that dry creek bed and was gone. So this went on for a couple weeks after. I worked with her husband, and he kept looking at me strange, and I'm like, he would just grin. I'm like, what is wrong with you? He said, I got to tell you something. And he told me the story, and I'm like, man, why didn't you tell me 2 weeks ago when this happened? I'd have went and looked for tracks. But, you know, she said, I'm calling Greg. I'm like, call me, please. But, yeah, he said, you don't want to bother him, you know, so.
You probably would have been thrilled.
Missed opportunity, yep. I would have been there, you know. Yeah, that would have been a perfect time to go and look. But, you know, people just, I don't know why she would have opened up. But he didn't want her to say anything, so yeah.
I know that some of these mountains, they kind of, it's West Virginia on one side and Virginia on the other. Have you noticed, do you see there's more reports on either the West Virginia side or the Virginia side, or do you kind of see, what have you noticed just looking at like the reports on the map or something?
There's more in Pelton County on the West Virginia side than on the Virginia side. I don't know. In particular, I don't think there's as much farmland on the western side of Rockingham County. There's more farmland closer to the boundary on the West Virginia side, which probably accounts for more reports. I know there was just a recent report. He hasn't filed a report, but the gentleman was on a West Side Road cutting wood and had a rock thrown at him, several rocks I believe, and he left the area and did not go back because it freaked him out. And that's right at the bottom of Shenandoah Mountain on the West Virginia side. It was the last, I guess, most recent report that I'd heard of the rock throwing incident.
I think that this is kind of strange, but I think that the topic really gained momentum through the early part of the 2000s from finding Bigfoot on TV. So it was in the forefront of everyone's minds from watching the show, and then when they'd hear something, they would create a report. They'd suspect Bigfoot activity, and so we were getting a ton of Bigfoot reports while the show was on TV. But now that the show is not on anymore, the reports have slowed down. I think a lot of people, I don't believe that a lot of people are no longer getting activity. I think that they now just don't know how to report it, because when it was a television show, they always talked about the BFRO and how you could go to the website and file reports and such. But now that's been so many years. I mean, the show's been off the air for at least 10 years now. And so I don't think that people remember how to file a report. And so at this point, if someone who's never been interested in the subject, never watched the show on Animal Planet, has some sort of activity, they've never seen the show to know what the BFRO is. So it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so when they witness something, they don't know what to do with it once they do have witnessed something.
I know Tyler Hall has covered, kind of the Shenandoah Valley area, but I'd be curious to know about reports specifically and kind of near the national park. I know you've mentioned to me, obviously that's a few mountain ranges over. You've got the George Washington, then you've got the Massanutten, and then kind of the ridge, I guess, where Shenandoah is. Have you taken reports in the Shenandoah National Park?
I have worked a couple of reports there that come to mind. Probably more than I can remember, but there was one north of Stanley. It was actually in It was in the region just west of Big Meadows, which is a big open field up at Skyline Drive, Shenandoah National Park. And a guy owns a house down there, and he owns a pretty close to 100 acres, I think it was, of farmland. And he saw one up on the top of his property, up the ridge of the open field. And he said it came out into the open and looked down at him. He was bush hogging down at the bottom part of his property. And he stopped and turned off his tractor and watched it for a few minutes. They watched each other from several hundred yards apart. And then this thing turned and took several large leaps and then disappeared. And then he said, I kept watching it, and then it came back and looked up over the ridge, almost as if looking to see, is it still watching me? And then it backed up and went away. But he's like, I have no doubt it was a Bigfoot. And it was probably 300 or 400 yards from the park itself, so it was very close. And there was another report I took on the eastern side of the Shenandoah National Park. It came off of the park. A guy was hunting down at the bottom on private land near Bacon Hollow. And the guy was in his tree stand down at a small open field at the bottom of the mountain. And this thing, he said, I never saw it, but I heard it when it was on top of the mountain, just screaming and roaring and just causing all kinds of commotion. And it was running down the mountain. And he said it was covering ground like crazy, just as fast as you could imagine something moving down the mountain. And he said it was screaming the whole time. It got all the way down to the bottom of the mountain. He thought it was going to come out into the field where he was watching for deer. And then he said it turned around and went back up the mountain, screaming and running and just roaring all the way back up the ridge. So he's like, again, I never saw it, but I have no doubt what it was. So we get some strange reports sometimes, but that one stayed in the back of my mind as being pretty cool, something different than you normally hear. Sasquatch are opportunists, so we have an awful lot of national forest here. So we have a lot of hunters, and but the wildlife is quite abundant. And one of the things that these creatures will search out are scraps and carcasses from where hunters have either poached deer or they've killed deer legally and just thrown the carcass out in the woods. And so these easy meals are very opportunistic opportunities for them. So I think that we get quite a bit of that. I actually worked a report right up that alley. There was like 19 deer carcasses in one spot, and there had been a lot of Bigfoot activity right there, right at that location where all those deer carcasses were. So now I don't know if those carcasses were put there by hunters or if they were just leftovers from the Squatch themselves, but they're definitely after the deer.
In your opinion, what is the best evidence that's come out of this part of Virginia? Anything Sasquatch-wise that you're aware of?
Oh gosh, best evidence. As far as evidence go, the most common and most easily gathered evidence is audio. Video is like obviously the golden standard, but getting video is almost impossible. So there's some good audio that's been captured. I actually captured some pretty good howls when I was out with Tyler Hall the last time.
While we didn't have great activity there at the dam in the evening, we returned to camp and we had recorders going at camp. And at different points in the evening, those recorders, I believe it was actually your recorder running, Charles, managed to pick up a couple of interesting howls. And so the first one that came in early in the evening has a combination of a howl and a whistle and a knock. And I'll play that for you now. There were a lot of coyotes in this clip originally. They were excessively loud, so I had to clip them out.
My recorder was not at camp. it was like 100 yards past camp on
Right.
the other side of the pond. So that way we didn't want to be able to catch any of our talking back and forth. You get much cleaner audio when you can get your recorder and get it away from all the people sitting around talking.
Yeah.
Because you step on audio sometimes
Yeah,
to capture something good. So it's just a good practice to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely keep your recorder somewhat outside of camp by 100 yards or so, and it cuts down on all.
And not near running water.
Not your running water.
Or that's all you're going to hear.
Kills it.
So there's something interesting about this howl that I'll talk about after we play it, but let's go through first and just let you hear it. So here we go. And the howl comes first. It's soft, but that was the howl. Now the whistle and knocks. So those knocks sounded like maybe a branch had been ripped off a tree or broken or something in some kind of an impact. It's hard to tell exactly what was making that, but the whistle just before that sound, that combination is very compelling to hear those together. The feature about the howl that we like and that we look for is its duration and its flat pitch. Coyotes and canids in general don't execute much of a flat pitch. Dogs, coyotes, wolves will use a flat pitch in their howls, but we don't have wolves here in Shenandoah Valley. But this long, flat, sustained pitch is pretty typical of what we see in suspected Sasquatch howls. And so this is a good one. This came in from quite a distance, so it's not very loud in the recording, but we did manage to capture it by keeping our recorder outside of the camp.
You know, we get tons of wood knocks, but you never get anything definitive. You know, we try. What we try to do is when we're gathering audio evidence, you try to get something with two different markers. So you want to get one vocal, but then you want a secondary marker in there also to I would say it would increase your odds of it being an authentic Sasquatch call. Probably, and I would say somewhere in the 90%. I mean, if you got two things that you think are Bigfoot related in the same audio file, then you're more than likely going to have something that's authentic. But that's the easiest thing to get, you know, the audio, because you don't necessarily even have to be there to gather it. So I put these long duration audio recorders out in the woods and leave them for 30 to 40 nights in a row. And then it's like Christmas. I go get it, swap out the battery, swap out the memory card, and go back and review my audio. And on occasion I get some good stuff, but that's going to be the easiest to get. It's a lot of legwork, but when you get that audio file, it's like Christmas. You don't know what you're going to get, you know. I set this out. It's just a little dry box that I put together for temporary audio recording from like we're in this location just for one night, so I'm not going to put in my big long duration audio recorder, but I can put fresh batteries in this and get like 19 hours of recording and microphones into the outside edges.
Let me zoom in on the mics there. Yeah, and these are mics that you make, right?
Yeah. They these are. I think these were my silver set that I had done. Now I've moved up to just doing the gold series that I build on my website. But this helps us get audio. This is our video, so we can capture a little bit of anything that happens in the area at any given time.
Kind of got your bases covered there.
Exactly. Virginia is it's fantastic for this, but it's a blessing and a curse because of the amount of national forest that we have in this part of the state. You know, there's not any national forest in the eastern part of Virginia, but in the western part, we have like 1.6 million acres of national forest. So trying to pinpoint these things where they are, I mean, there's not that many of them. So trying to find where their little clans may be is tough. You can go out for weeks at a time and never get a single knock or anything. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's nice to have so much land for them, but and so much land for us to research, but it becomes difficult to. I'll put my audio recorder in one place for a month, and if I don't get anything, then I have to pull it out and I'll just move it somewhere else several miles away and try this location. And it's never ending. It's a crapshoot. But the one thing that I really like about this is it almost becomes a game. It's like, who can be sneakier, them or us? So we have to try to out sneaky them with camera traps or audio traps, and it's like, I know that they know my audio recorder's in that tree, because that doesn't belong, but they don't seem to mind audio recorders. That's very strange. I can't explain that. They don't seem to mind audio recorders, but they do mind video equipment. But I've had them, not in Virginia, but I had one in North Carolina that looked right at my camera while it was recording, and this thing was definitely reasoning. It's like it looked left at a cookie that I'd put on a picnic table, and then it looked right up the hill towards the other campers, and then it looked straight ahead at my camera that was recording. But like, the camera was sitting on top of a cooler with a trash bag draped over top of it, because thermals can see through trash bags. And so it couldn't see the camera, but it knew something was not right, and it did not take that cookie. He was literally from here to that picnic table from the cookie and didn't take it. So it lifted its head up, and you could see it looking, turning, looked at the camera, and after about 8 seconds, it ducked its head, turned, and went back the way it came. And so getting something like that is exciting. I've only captured something that I think is a Bigfoot just one time on camera after all these years. But I think that campground that I was in has a history of Bigfoot activity as well. It's the same campground where the squeaky footage from Mike Green back in, 2004, I think it was. And 2009 is when Mike got that footage. But same campground, like 5 campsites down the hill from it. So there's definitely a history there. This part of the country is it's got a little bit of everything. We have the mountainous terrains here in this part, but you don't have to go very far before you lose the mountains completely, and it just becomes flat, and you can see for miles just from a low elevation even. So it's I don't know that it's anything that it's any better than like the Rocky Mountains and stuff, but they're all different in their own aspect. What we have here is special to us because it's home, and so we love what we have here. We've moved away, but at some point in our lives, and realize pretty quickly that that's no place like home. So you start missing the mountains and the wildlife and all of the little things that we have here, with all the great hiking and all the great the parks, the state parks, the national park that we have nearby. It's got a little bit of everything here. It's awesome.